Hello my friends, let's go straight to the Bakhmut because Russia there advances very significantly and they've took quite a lot of the territory near to Klishivka. If we just scroll timeline a couple of days ago, you'll see that they're aiming towards this road, which is very important for Ukrainian forces. We don't use this road for supplies any longer because Russia is firing their artillery systems to cut Ukrainian supplies. So the very important part is Chasiv Yar, and Russia knows about it. That's why their main goal is to get this one under their control. And that is why they're pushing directly to that small town, or you may call it village. But Ukraine also has the forces in that region, so the only way for us to withstand Bakhmut is to create the counterattack right now or in nearby few days to cut Russians in this area. So the part of the Russian army might be isolated in this area. As for the Russians, to avoid this scenario, they need to advance also from this side and all across this front line. And if they count the Chasiv Yar, which is the only supply line for the Bakhmut, my friends, Bakhmut will be left by Ukrainian forces. I have no doubts about it. Because there are no anyways how you can supply the city using other roads. There are none of the roads in this area, so the only one comes from this place. The main one is here, which is unusable, and the other one is very close to the front lines, also unusable. So Russians tried to get Bakhmut for a long time under their control, and the only way how they could potentially do it is cutting Ukrainian supplies. And basically it was the Ukrainian tactics for a very long time. We cut the Russian supplies and now they do the same. Yes, potentially we can still use the fields, but the weather is not preferable. This winter is very warm. That is why the soil is not that robust to withstand the weight of the vehicles. Also, we cannot use the aviation in this area because Russia put the air defense systems. Still, we continue to use Su-25. They are tactical airplanes which are mostly used to attack the ground forces of the Russian Federation, but to deliver goods, the transport airplanes, there will be shut down for sure. As for now, seeing this shape of the constant Russian attacks around Bakhmut, I may say that there is no good perspective for the city in the nearby future. And Russia continued basically to destroy the city using their artillery and sometimes aviation. Then the city is destroyed, you cannot use it for the shelter for the troops. That's the logic of the Russian army. Yes, it is barbarian and they use it as usual. So the only way how Ukraine may save Bakhmut is over here. We spoke about it, the Chasiv Yar and this road, those are very important supply lines for the Bakhmut city. If Russia cuts them out, Bakhmut is doomed. And I think next week I'll tell you for sure whether Ukrainian forces would be able to keep Bakhmut under their control. Now it's difficult. But my friends, even if Ukraine loses Bakhmut, it's just the tactical advance of the Russian army. Not significant at all. If you zoom out, you'll see that Ukraine is a big country. It's the biggest country in Europe, bigger than France. And we have many of the cities around, many Bakhmuts, bigger cities, smaller villages. So for every city, Russia loses like tens of thousands soldiers. In Bakhmut alone, Wagner Group lost more than 50% of their army. And that is why I'm still wondering, what's the point of this war for the Russian Federation? I mean, they will not win it in strategic perspective. Yes, they may take some towns and villages for some period of the time, but then Ukraine will have enough weaponry, we're gonna take all of that back. Before, Russia lost around 10,000 soldiers taking Izum. They've took it for a few months and Ukraine liberated just in one day. And I'm sure that the same will happen with the other parts of the occupied territories. Remember, then Russia took Severodonetsk and Lysychansk. Little by little, there were some of the fights for many weeks, but Russian army got exhausted and Ukrainian army used it to counterattack. Not at the same exact place, but in different direction and liberating this vast area. So what's the way out for Russia? Well, I think to stop this war, basically taking their troops out, but in that case, Putin will lose his power. And that is why I think that they will continue this war until they can, and finally Russia will be defeated on a war field. And we don't need to go to Moscow to defeat Russia. No, the modern wars are not like that. But if Russia loses, for example, in Crimea, at least part of that peninsula, Putin will also lose his power. And with the current military support from our allies, Ukraine will not lose. Russia has no resource to counterattack with the massive forces. Yes, some of the Western journalists also say that Russia is preparing for one more advancement on Ukraine like it was in 2022, but Russia has no resources and they haven't announced the new massive mobilization. And if they throw all the forces that they have right now, that army will be just demolished. The only acceptable army that they have is just a Wagner group, but they don't have enough people. Now, as you see, this conflict turned to the more or less standstill situation as it was in World War I, trench wars with lots of the casualties. I guess in April, Ukrainian army will go on a counterattack. And the potential scenario is over here to go straight to Melitopol. But some of the military experts say that Ukraine may go across the Dnieper River over here. I say that this is kind of the suicide mission, but they say that it should work. They start to speak about it after some of the successful Ukrainian counterattacks performed by the special forces in this area. Our guys just crossed the river with the silent rubber boats and attacked Russians in their barracks. We did it 2 times already, and yes, we got some of the wounded soldiers, but in general, we hadn't had any losses while conducting those operations, and that shows that Russia has nothing to propose against the crossing of the Dnieper River. So military experts say that Ukraine may prepare the plan to cross the river, but I think it's quite risky because all of the bridges, the pontoon bridges, could be demolished by the Russian aviation or artillery systems. And that's why still I think this one is more preferable compared to Kherson direction. The direction on Melitopol just solves many of the issues in this area. So how would our forces attack, or it's better to say counterattack, in this area or any kind of other area? And why do we need tanks and artillery systems? Because some of the experts also say that it's artillery war, we should have more artillery and no tanks. Actually doesn't work like that. Every army unit is unique and is used to perform specific tasks. Alright, let's say that Ukraine wants to assault to this region from the north, and it could be any part of the other territory. Firstly, intelligence provides our military with information about the Russian bases, and we fire the artillery systems and long-range missiles, HIMARS and other stuff. We demolish the Russian positions, backups, supplies, etc. Because Russia has, as usual, 3 of defense lines. First of all, at the very front line, then the second one, then the third one. So we exhaust their supplies and backup sources. Then we fire middle range and short range artillery to hit those supply lines and the nearby trenches to Ukrainian side, causing them severe losses and disorganization. Both of those steps also might be helped with aviation. That is why we need F-16s, F-18s and other types of the airplanes. Then finally we use the tank brigades to penetrate Russian defense lines. That is why I'm saying that tanks are offensive weapons. There is nothing better than tanks if we speak about the penetration of the constructed defense lines. You may find it in any kind of the material for any kind of the military training. And it's proved by Germany in the beginning of the World War II. They constructed those tank brigades that were very fast, and they call it blitzkrieg. Then they penetrated the defense line of the enemy and then continued to move with their heavy armored tanks. Yeah, sorry, but the time at the beginning of the war, they used not the heavy tanks but the light tanks that could penetrate the lines very fast. So it's going to be the main vector of the attack, and there could be some of the accessory attack vectors just to disorder the front line for the enemy. And before that massive attack, I forgot to say that you should use some of the small units to find the weakest spot in defense. Usually groups from 10 up to 50 people that may attack on different directions and know the response of the enemy. So they attack, retreat, it may happen like that. So this process is very important over here. That could be also backed up by the aviation, the same F-16s and also Warthogs that may be used against the ground forces like tanks and other vehicles. So then you went through defense lines, you also launched the high mobile vehicles that will have like mortars, Bradleys and other units. You send them side by side with the tanks and their goal is to destroy the enemy on the flank. So they go like this, dispersed and causing more disorder to the enemy. So first the tank is like a fist which is backed up by the other vehicles. With the similar tactics, Ukrainian forces liberated the part of the Kherson region and Kherson city itself. The only downside was that we had not enough tanks. For this counterattack, we'll have enough heavy tanks. Also, vehicles like Bradleys are effective against the tanks because they have 12 missiles. They also carry infantry, and basically you just encircle the small parts of the Russians everywhere and they're panicking, they're surrendering. The same thing happened in Kharkiv region. So that is why the tanks were so important to create this fist, because Russians were able to build their defense lines in many of the regions, and the only way how you can penetrate them is using the tanks. There is simply no other way in a modern day war. And why do we need the long range missiles for like 150 kilometers? To extend the Russian supply lines, because if we destroy their supplies in Melitopol, they'll have to create the long supplies, let's say from Henichins to supply Tokmak and this region, and they cannot throw many of the forces straight away to withstand Ukrainian counterattacks in that area. And if you have the long supply lines, your army cannot attack. It's the rule, my friends. So that's why the long-range missiles are crucial for Ukrainian army. But I'm sure that we're gonna receive the airplanes and also missiles in a future help for Ukrainian military. And as Joe Biden said, Ukraine is getting ready for the counterattack. Where it's gonna happen, my friends, I have two of the points where it might be. First of all, I think over here, and secondary, it could be over here in the north part of Luhansk region. But as I say to you, some of the military experts say that Ukraine potentially may cross the Dnieper River because Russia has not enough forces to withstand the counterattack in this area. Very risky. And as for Russia, they will continue to throw their forces, destroying them in Bakhmut and in Donbass in general. So we are giving them some sort of the ground in exchange of their significant losses. I think this strategy is more or less okay for now for Ukrainian army until we'll have enough weaponry for the massive counterattack. So in case we go on a counterattack and take Melitopol this year, cutting Russian army into two pieces, that would be awesome year. My friends, now please press the like to this video. Also, if you want to support this channel financially, there are some of the links in the video description below. You may support me on Patreon, PayPal or Donatello, whichever is more convenient for you. My friends, thank you so much for your support. And I wish you all a peaceful sky wherever you are and have a great time.